breaking the cycle of trauma instead of numbing it, feeling the pain instead of escaping it. Welcome back to Healing Both Sides. I'm Christina Fox. We're continuing our Cycle Breaker series, where we're looking honestly at the patterns that can travel through families and generations and what it takes for us to finally say, "This stops with me." Some of these conversations will speak more directly to addiction and recovery. Some will speak more to the people who love someone struggling with addiction, and many will speak to both. But I want to make something clear as we move through this series. Cycle breaking isn't just about addiction. These conversations can apply to anyone's life. Maybe addiction isn't part of your story at all. Maybe your cycle is unhealthy relationships, poor boundaries, or never being taught boundaries in the first place, childhood trauma, abandonment, abuse, neglect, people-pleasing, anger, silence, constantly rescuing other people, avoiding difficult conversations, or simply repeating behaviors you watched growing up because nobody ever showed you another way. We all have patterns. Some were handed down to us. Some we learned by watching the people around us. Some developed because we were trying to survive what was happening in our lives. And some we've repeated for so long that we don't even recognize them as patterns anymore. That's why breaking cycles isn't about finding someone to blame. It's about being willing to look honestly at what we inherited, what we learned, what we've experienced, and even the patterns we've created ourselves, and deciding what we no longer want to carry forward. So wherever you're coming from, I want you to listen for your cycle, because you don't have to have addiction in your story to recognize that something in your life needs to change. And some of these conversations may be uncomfortable. That's okay. We're going to talk about the things people and families sometimes don't talk about. We're going to have compassion for where these patterns came from while still holding ourselves accountable for what we do with them now. Because we may not have started the cycle, but we can decide what happens next, breaking the cycle of trauma instead of numbing it. I want to start today's conversation with the question, what do you do when something hurts? Not physically, emotionally. What do you do when you're grieving? Rejected? Lonely? Angry? Ashamed? Afraid? Overwhelmed? What do you do when something from your past comes back up and you don't want to think about it? What do you reach for? Because we talk a lot about addiction, but I don't think we talk enough about escape. And escape can wear a whole lot of different clothes. For one person, it's alcohol. For another, it's drugs. For somebody else, it's food, gambling, gaming, shopping, sex, work, social media, weed, relationships, constantly staying busy, sleeping, never being alone, trying to control everybody around you, anything that keeps you from having to sit still long enough to feel what you don't want to feel. Not every coping behavior is an addiction. And I'm not suggesting that eating a piece of cake, working hard, buying something, having a drink, or spending time online automatically means somebody has a problem. That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking something much more personal. What am I using this for? Am I enjoying something? Or am I escaping something? Because sometimes the behavior isn't the first problem. Sometimes it's the solution we found for a pain we never learned how to handle. What if the substance worked? Here's an uncomfortable truth about addiction. At some point, the substance probably worked. Maybe not for long. Maybe the consequences eventually became devastating. But initially, it did something. It quieted something. It made someone feel confident. It made trauma disappear for a few hours. It slowed racing thoughts. It numbed grief. It took away fear. It helped someone sleep. It made them feel connected. It made them stop caring. It gave them energy. It allowed them to forget. And if we're going to understand addiction, we have to understand that. Because otherwise we stand on the outside saying, why would anybody do this to themselves? While the person struggling may be thinking, you don't understand what this does for me. Eventually, of course, the thing that once felt like a solution can become another enormous problem. Now, you're not only carrying the original pain, you're carrying addiction too, and everything that came with it. Then you get clean, and guess what's still there? This is something I think people outside of recovery sometimes don't understand. They think, you stopped using. What's wrong now? But if drugs or alcohol were helping you escape emotions, and suddenly you remove them, the emotions didn't disappear. The trauma didn't disappear. The grief didn't disappear. The shame didn't disappear. The relationship problems didn't disappear. Childhood didn't disappear. Everything you didn't want to feel may still be sitting there. Except now the thing you used to numb, it is gone. That's one reason early recovery can be incredibly uncomfortable. You're learning how to experience life without your escape hatch. And people around you may not understand that. Hell, some of them didn't understand how you ended up using substances in the first place. Now, they really don't understand why you're sober and still struggling. They may think, you're clean now. You should be happy. Why are you still angry? Why are you emotional? Why can't you just move forward? Because putting down a substance and healing the reason you kept reaching for it are not necessarily the same thing. Getting clean can expose the pain that numbing kept hidden. That's when deeper healing begins. And some of the people judging, you may be escaping too. Now here's where this conversation might get uncomfortable. Because sometimes the person saying, I don't understand how anybody could become addicted to drugs, goes home and drinks every night, or gambles every weekend, or eats every emotion, or works 70 hours a week because they can't stand being alone with themselves, or controls everybody around them because uncertainty makes them anxious, or jumps from relationship to relationship because being alone feels unbearable. Again, I am not saying all of these things are the same. They're not. Different behaviors carry very different risks and consequences, but sometimes they can serve a similar emotional purpose: escape. And because one form of escape is legal, socially acceptable, productive looking, or doesn't result in an arrest, we can convince ourselves, mine isn't a problem. That's something I understand personally. I thought I was different. There was a time when I looked at people struggling with drugs and believed I was different. I worked. I paid my bills. I functioned. I didn't believe alcohol was controlling my life. So in my mind, I had my shit together. Other people had addiction problems. I drank. Those were different things in my head. I could point to everything I was still doing and use it as evidence. I went to work. I handled responsibilities. I kept going. So how bad could it really be? Except looking back now, alcohol affected damn near everything. It affected my relationships. It affected my mood. It affected how I reacted to things. And if I'm being truthful about it, I wasn't a nice person. In fact, I was mean, especially with my children. I don't say that proudly, but I say it because if I'm going to talk about accountability on this podcast, I can't only ask everybody else to practice it. I have to be willing to look at myself too. I spent years believing that because my life didn't look like someone else's addiction, mine somehow didn't count. That's one of the lies functioning can tell us. I still go to work, so I'm okay. My bills are paid, so I'm okay. I've never been arrested for it, so I'm okay. I'm not using what they're using, so I'm okay. But functioning and healthy are not the same thing. You can be showing up for work every day and still be falling apart emotionally. We create hierarchies of addiction. Families do this all the time. Alcohol gets compared to drugs. Weed gets compared to alcohol. Prescription medication gets compared to street drugs. Someone who works gets compared to someone who's unemployed. Someone who has never been arrested gets compared to someone who's been incarcerated. And everybody wants to know, who's the real addict? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe we should ask, what is this behavior doing to your life? Can you stop? What happens when you try? Are you using it to avoid emotions? Is it damaging your relationships? Is it changing who you are? Are there consequences? Are you hiding it? Are you constantly defending it? Has somebody who loves you told you they're worried? And maybe most importantly, are you being honest with yourself? Because I wasn't always honest with myself. Sometimes we stop one thing and grab another. I've watched this happen in my own family. Someone can stop drinking, and that's huge. That deserves credit. Recovery from alcohol can change and save a life. But stopping one behavior doesn't automatically heal everything underneath it. Sometimes another behavior becomes more prominent. Maybe it's gambling, food, smoking, weed, shopping, relationships, control, whatever it is. Again, that doesn't automatically mean somebody has developed another addiction, but it does give us something worth asking. Did I heal the pain? Or did I just change how I cope with it? I've had to ask myself that too. Food is one of the places I have to look at myself honestly. And control has been another, especially with my kids. Control can be an escape too. This one took me a long time to understand. For years, I tried to control what happened with my sons. Treatment, recovery, choices, where they went, what they did, what they should do next. Of course, I called it helping. And some of it was helping. But some of it was me desperately trying to control an outcome I was terrified of. Because if I could get them into treatment, if I could get them to stay, if I could make them understand, if I could find the right place, if I could say the right thing, maybe I wouldn't have to feel the terror of accepting. I cannot control whether my adult child chooses recovery. Control gave me something to do with fear. And that matters. Because numbing isn't always about making ourselves feel nothing. Sometimes numbing is about staying so busy trying to fix everything that we never have to sit with our own feelings. That's another kind of escape. I thought I had it under control. Even when my kids were going through treatment, there was still a part of me that thought, they're the ones with the addiction problem. I had my shit under control. Except I didn't. My coping just looked different. And I think that's something many people can recognize if they're willing to look. We judge somebody whose coping mechanism is destroying their life visibly, while ours is destroying pieces of ours quietly. Their consequences might be obvious. Jail, treatment, homelessness, overdose, job loss. Ours might look like broken relationships, constant anxiety, anger, isolation, health problems, never feeling satisfied, controlling everyone, eating our emotions, drinking every evening, working constantly, never sitting still, never dealing with ourselves. One person's pain is visible. Another person's pain is socially acceptable. Pain is still pain. This isn't about excusing addiction. I want to be crystal clear here. Understanding trauma does not mean excusing harmful behavior. Trauma does not give somebody permission to abuse people. It doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't erase responsibility. It doesn't mean loved ones have to tolerate destructive behavior because they've been through a lot. Many people experience horrible trauma and never develop substance use disorders. And people struggling with addiction are still responsible for what they do, especially as recovery progresses. But understanding trauma can help answer a different question. Not, why are you such a terrible person? But, what happened? What did you learn to do to survive it? And what do you need to learn now? That's a very different conversation. Sometimes survival skills outlive the emergency. This is true far beyond addiction. Maybe shutting down emotionally kept you safe as a child. Maybe people-pleasing prevented conflict. Maybe controlling everything made an unpredictable home feel slightly safer. Maybe food comforted you. Maybe staying busy prevented you from thinking. Maybe alcohol quieted your mind. Maybe drugs made unbearable feelings bearable. Those behaviors may have served a purpose once. That doesn't mean they still serve you now. Sometimes we carry survival tools into a life where they're actually hurting us. Cycle breaking means learning when survival has become self-destruction. Feeling it is scary. Everybody says, you have to feel your feelings. Sounds wonderful. Until you actually have to do it. Because what if the feeling is grief? What if it's shame? What if it's rage? What if it's something that happened when you were 6 years old that you've spent 40 years trying not to think about? What if sobriety brings memories back? What if slowing down means realizing how lonely you are? What if giving up control means admitting you're terrified? That's why telling someone to simply stop their coping mechanism without helping them develop healthier ones isn't enough. We need somewhere for the pain to go. Feeling pain doesn't mean drowning in it. Processing pain doesn't mean sitting around suffering every minute of every day. It means learning healthier ways to move through what we feel. Sometimes that's professional counseling or trauma therapy. Sometimes recovery treatment, support groups, talking honestly with someone safe, journaling, movement, exercise, meditation, prayer, breathing, creative work, learning grounding techniques, learning how your body responds to stress, getting enough sleep, learning to name an emotion instead of immediately reacting to it. Sometimes it's as simple and as difficult as saying, I'm angry right now, and not drinking, not using, not calling somebody to start an argument, not eating until you're uncomfortable, not going to the casino, not trying to control somebody, just allowing, I'm angry, and then figuring out why. That's work. Recovery can look messy from the outside. This is something loved ones need to understand too. Someone genuinely working on recovery may not immediately become the person you hoped they'd become. They may be emotional. They may need space. They may suddenly have boundaries. They may start talking about childhood. They may question relationships. They may cry. They may be angry. They may realize certain environments aren't healthy for them anymore. That doesn't mean every behavior should be excused because they're healing. Accountability still matters, but healing isn't always pretty. Sometimes a person who has numbed themselves for years is learning emotional skills that other people learned decades earlier. Give recovery room to be recovery. And recovery doesn't mean everyone will understand you. Some people aren't going to understand. Some people will say, why can't you just have one drink? You've been sober long enough. Why are you still going to meetings? Why do you need therapy? You're always talking about the past. Some may even become uncomfortable with your healing because the healthier you become, the more obvious unhealthy patterns around you become. That's difficult, especially when it's family. But you don't need everybody to understand why you're changing. You need to understand why you're changing. Loved ones have their own numbing to examine. This is healing both sides. So, loved ones, we don't get to spend the entire episode pointing at the person using. What do we do with pain? Do we try to control what someone else does? Rescue? Eat? Drink? Smoke? Gamble? Shop? Work? Stay constantly busy? Obsess over the person struggling because dealing with their problems is easier than dealing with ours? That last one can sting. Sometimes focusing completely on someone else's addiction means we never have to examine ourselves. As long as they're the problem, we don't have to look at our own pain. That's why when loved ones begin stepping back from addiction, something surprising can happen. Suddenly there's space, and in that space, we meet ourselves. That can be uncomfortable too. Don't just remove the escape, build something healthier. If you take something away, something has to replace what it was doing for you. If alcohol helped you relax, you need healthier ways to regulate stress. If drugs helped you escape trauma, trauma treatment may need to become part of recovery. If food comforts you, you may need to learn other ways to soothe yourself. If controlling everybody makes you feel safe, you may need to learn how to tolerate uncertainty. If staying busy keeps you from feeling, you may need to practice being still. If relationships keep you from being alone, maybe you need to learn how to be with yourself. That's why healing is bigger than stopping. It's learning another way to live. Ask yourself what you're actually trying to escape. This week, pay attention. When you automatically reach for something, pause for a second. You don't have to judge yourself. Just ask, what am I feeling right now? Am I bored? Lonely? Angry? Ashamed? Anxious? Overwhelmed? Rejected? Scared? Do I feel powerless? And then, what am I hoping this behavior will change about how I feel? That question can tell you a lot. because sometimes we think we're craving the thing, when what we're really craving is relief. And once we understand that, we can begin finding healthier ways to create relief without destroying ourselves in the process. The goal isn't to never hurt again. Cycle breaking isn't about reaching some magical point where nothing hurts. Life is going to hurt sometimes. People die. Relationships end. Children make choices that terrify us. People disappoint us. We make mistakes. We experience rejection. We grieve. We age. We lose things. We regret things. We remember things. Healing doesn't remove pain from being human. It changes what we do when pain arrives. Instead of, how do I make this disappear? We begin asking, how do I move through this without abandoning myself? That's the shift. Maybe your family drank through pain. Maybe they used through pain. Maybe they ate through pain. Maybe they gambled through pain. Maybe they controlled everybody through pain. Maybe they never talked about pain at all. You don't have to continue that. You can be the person who finally says, this hurts, and instead of running, I'm going to learn how to heal it. That may be one of the hardest cycles any of us ever break. But imagine what happens when the next generation watches someone experience pain without destroying themselves to escape it. They're learning something different. They're learning pain can be survived. Emotions don't have to be feared. Help can be asked for. Trauma can be talked about. We don't have to numb everything that hurts. And that's how another cycle begins to end. Before we end today, I want to leave you with something to think about. What part of this cycle belongs to you to break? Not your child's part, not your parents' part, not your partner's part, yours. Because we can spend years waiting for someone else to change before we allow ourselves to heal. But cycle breaking doesn't require everyone in the family to start at the same time. Sometimes it starts with one person who tells the truth, who gets help, who chooses recovery, who sets the boundary, who stops rescuing, who deals with the trauma, who says, I'm not carrying this forward anymore. And that person might be you. I thank you for spending this time with me. To connect, please visit ChristinaFoxAuthor.com. From there, you can explore my books, listen to the podcast, read the blog, subscribe to my newsletter, and connect with me across all of my social media platforms. Remember, you may not have started the cycle, but you can be the one who changes what happens next. I'll see you next time.